Hello and welcome to Nerdarchy. For nerds, by nerds, I'm Nerd Steve, and tonight I'm hanging out with this nerd.
Nerdarchy Ted. How you doing this fine and lovely evening, sir?
I'm doing good, and tonight we're going to be talking about setting the mood. Uh, and
So we're talking about like candles and roses and that kind of stuff.
maybe rose petals, whatever it takes, right? It depends. You might be depends on what kind of game you're playing, right? Like if you have a romance heavy game, like that might be called for. But if you have some other type of game in mind, that may not be appropriate.
That is entirely true. So like I kind of looked at this tonight as an option of not only are there things that you can do at the table, but also like what you can do while you're at the table. So that was kind of some of the thought patterns that I have. So we can kind of get into each of those aspects and see what you can do to make your game more in the moment because you've set the mood properly.
Yeah, I think first and foremost, you have to define what is the game you're playing, right? Whether you're playing Dungeons and Dragons or another TTRPG. Um, but beyond that too, like you can drill down on like the specific genre you're going for, even within a game like Dungeons and Dragons, right? We've done all kinds of different things. We've done horror theme, we've done post-apocalyptic, we've done nautical theme. Um, off the we've done obviously we've done high fantasy, we've done some low fantasy. So right first you start by defining the play space that you and your players are going to be in. Great, spotter for session zero for getting everyone acclimated and making sure everyone shows up to the for the right kind of character for the particular game you're playing. Like maybe you don't want to make that awesome desert nomad you had an idea for Ted's nautical game, unless you are really going for the fish out of water or camel out of the desert kind of motif with your character, because it just sucks like if you built a character that's designed to fight and kill undead, and you're playing in a world where all undeath has been banished for all time. Character's probably not going to be a lot of fun for you.
Mechanically you're gonna have features that you just don't that you won't use. So what is the point in being there? Just like your desert powered character that is legitimately on a boat. It's like, well, you've got plenty of water around, so your ability to get more water out of desert plants not all that useful, dude. There's plenty of water.
Right. So like that's why it starts right at the session zero, so that everyone comes prepared to play in the game that you're playing. Right. You set the mood there, set the expectations, but then once you get into the game, how do you how do you make that happen? Like for instance, horror is very difficult in D because D&D is a game about killing monsters and taking their stuff, and horror tropes tend to rely more heavily on the protagonist being afraid of the horrible things that are in the story, right? So you have to
Yeah,
figure out
you
as a
you
DM to make how to make that happen.
you ultimately you need that buy-in. If the players aren't going to be afraid of the thing, then it's not the proper horror game that you're looking for. So you really have to kind of tease things out in just the right manner, or it's not going to work.
Yeah. So I think like for each particular genre, it's about drilling down to what is the essence of that particular genre. What is the theme that's going to be the thing that you want to get everyone in the mood for, right?
Yep.
Obviously, with horror, it's about fright and scare and suspense. With post-apocalyptic, it probably is a more survivalist game, right? It's about managing resources and there not being enough, and you figuring out how to make do with what you have. Um, also, and then high fantasy, it's about highlighting, you know, a magic rich world where, things that are fantastical might be very mundane in that world. And what does that look like? How do you impart that upon the group, right? And in a way that their characters are not like awestruck and wonderstruck all the time by everything that's around them, because that's just the normal, that's their just day to day. That's normal for them. Like Ebron's like a good example of that.
And unless you're taking characters that are not from that place and aren't used to it, then sure, then you can have, you know, uh, the demonstrate the aspect of how amazing this place is by having those players encounter that for the first time. So like our campaign world, is pretty much all about chaos, and there is a lot of carnage, and each areas of the world have been developed differently. So like the area that I've been running a campaign in is like the city of artisans, or artifice, uh because it's built on top of the resources of a Vargarian, planar ship. So there is a lot of technology that's founded there that doesn't exist everywhere else. So other parts of the world would just be like, okay, well, this has got your regular fantasy, and they might not know what, a pistol is or any of that kind of stuff. But, in the City of Artifice, yeah, they got that because it's been reverse engineered and made with normal things. So like when describing to the players, this wondrous city that they've encountered for the first time, like they're seeing this technology, like even things like player pianos exist, that it's like, holy crap, like I can push a button and the piano will just play music. That's incredible.
They're coming
like,
for the
you know,
bard's job. So how did you go about in that game kind of defining those aspects of the city, but not only making it, you're like highlighting and showcasing these amazing things players, right? But also, how do you highlight like how mundane it is to the regular citizens of this?
So when I first started, we had a little bit of a, a talk session zero, and said, okay, how do you guys feel about, starting out, just coming into the city? Nobody is standardly there. Um, you know, but I worked with each of them to figure out like what has brought you here, how is everybody getting together, um, and then I tried to like get people in a location and describe, okay, well, this is how this works here, and you describe how to everybody else no one's reacting to these elements of technology, whether it be mechanical birds flying around to deliver messages, or some kind of uh what I call hops, are like, public transportation on like these little, wire carts that fly around on these racks that will jump from section of the city to section of the city. Um, and to everybody else, as the characters are experiencing this and seeing it as normal, everybody else is like, or sorry, seeing it as something new, everybody else is seeing it as something normal. So like they're reacting in character while everybody else is like, okay, this is humdrum and normal because they've been seeing it for the last couple of years.
In my Under the Dome game, which is a kind of a mix mash of Arcana Punk and post-apocalyptic, right? Uh, the players, will go outside the city to scavenge for things, and it's dangerous outside the city, but also inside the city, there's a level of technology that's based on, essentially magic that they're used to. Well, later in that campaign, another character gets introduced that's a gift that's kind of been shipwrecked or stranded here. Talks about flying ships and going through from sphere to sphere, and talks about space travel. and the players who find magical things and machinery to be quite mundane, to the point where people are being body modded both organically and mechanically, are like, yo man, did you hit your head in a gladiatorial arena? What happened? Too many concussions, like that
It's like,
skull of
yeah,
yours looks pretty thick.
it's like, yeah, you're traveling through space. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
We're riding these, post-apocalyptic motorcycles while, this dude's over here got a scorpion tail and, this our weavern tail. My character's all kinds of heavily modded out with, added horns and claws and what have you. But nope, space travel? Nah, that ain't possible.
And yeah, that's crazy talk, my friend. Crazy talk. So, it's fun to contrast different things that are kind of normal and regular, in the world with things that aren't, right? That's another way of kind of highlighting what's going on. And we touched on horror a little bit, but I think that's one of the hardest genres in D&D, as I mentioned earlier. But if you really look to some of the great horror movies out there, not like your grindhouse splatterhouse style movies, but more of the classics, more like Hitchcock and stuff like that, where it's like it's more about what's happening off camera, out of sight, than you know, the having a gore fest in front of the players, having creepy, unexplained things happen, things that they can't just look at their character sheet and immediately solve the problem, and it's a big part of that is just pacing and not going balls to the wall right away. And also, you have to have, in a campaign like that, you need highs and lows. If everything is always up here, then your players are going to always be in a hyper state of awareness. So they're not going to be able to react to the things that you want them to. So you have to put some levity in there. You have to have some downtime when things aren't freaky and scary all the time, and they're not in danger and people aren't being ripped to shreds. So that when those really bad things happen, it's more impactful. It means a lot more. You need those peaks and valleys.
Every campaign needs to have its highs and lows, it's good and bads. Now, you as a GM, you as a player need to determine like what kind of, game are you playing? What is your investment? Are you looking for something that's highly emotional, and is it expected to really, impact a character? And you don't, even if you're impacting the character, like no one is expecting you like to, actually shed tears or, crumple into a ball of uselessness because, you're that into the character. You could just be like, all right, yeah, my character lets out a single tear, or I drop to my knees, crying, you know. But if you don't have, the investment, if you don't have the acknowledgement of what it is that you're looking for out of that game, then you aren't going to have those kind of scenes. Um, as Dave says, you need your give and take, your highs and lows. Uh, so again, with your session zero, you can talk about like, okay, well, is it something that like a character has something that's precious to them, and it's supposed to be just like an heirloom item, it's not magical or any of that kind of stuff. How impactful is it to that character if you lose that? Is you going to go on a grand quest to get it back? Like that could be, a low moment of when that item is, taken or lost or what have you, and getting it back is like, okay, holy crap, now I feel better, now I feel whole because I have my grandfather's amulet or whatever it is. Or heck, that could be like a premise for your character, is it's taken pre-session zero and you're on the quest to get it back. Like, all of those things can be discussed there, and that ties your character into whatever story is going on.
Yeah. Now, I would say like your session 0 is where you're going to do the telling as the GM. And not just telling, but having a conversation with your players about what this is about, what they want to see, what are they interested in during the campaign, and that's your time to shine as a GM, where you get to show, right? Like if if for instance, like I played in a horror campaign, GM ran for me, did a fantastic job, and like one of the players just kept seeing their character dead, like all over the place, right? Not all over the place, but like every few sessions it would come up, like, oh, there's his character in the Hangman's Noose hanging from a tree. Oh, there's his this character's decapitated head on a pedestal. Which and which the player was really good and really bought into it, this horrifying aspect of like, what does this mean? Why do I keep seeing these visions of death for my character? And and sometimes only that character would see it. Sometimes we'd all see it. So the player was able to role play off of that and really like kind of delve into the psychological horror of those scenes, and then also like worrying about things coming up later in the game that hinted at things, and that character being like, oh, is this going to be another thing that affects me, or even like, oh, is this how my character, like, are these premonitions of what's to come? Is this how my character is going to die in this campaign? But but because there was no mechanics involved, right? They were just narrative elements that were introduced into the game that the other players reacted to and bought into, made it that much more impactful. So also we do have, if you guys have questions, you can throw them in the chat. We already have one from Fear. If we wanted to, Fear Pubs highlights. If we wanted to uh, tackle that, Ted, before we go any
Oh,
further.
always love answering the chat questions.
And I feel like this is one we've kind of addressed this a lot in different videos and things, because regularly it's one that comes up for DMs. And how do I get some relatively new players to realize they need to pay attention and ask questions about things that the DM mentions? I'll prepare things for them, but it's just deer in the headlights. So there could be a couple things going
I,
on here.
I have been both the player and the DM of this particular scenario. So the first and foremost, I would say, player handouts. If you've got something that you can give to the players, that could be, whether it be setting information, character goals, any of those kind of things that are a nod to, hey, these are the things that are important to you that I have taken note of, or that are important to the game that you should be aware of. That gives them all a little bit of a clue and a step up into the direction, so that they're aware that there's information out there that they don't have yet.
So there's usually a couple things here. One, it could just be that they're new and timid, uh which is very reasonable. But also too, sometimes if your players aren't paying attention and they're not really asking questions that you think they should be asking, maybe the information that you're supplying as a GM just isn't striking a nerve with them, isn't interesting their particular characters, right? So, and I've had this happen in my own games where like I got all this stuff planned and I'm putting it out there and I'm prepping for them, and then they'll latch on to something that was like a throwaway comment by me, and it's at that point you have a fork in the road with your campaign. You keep going with the stuff you planned that maybe they're not responding to, or you can look at the thing that seems to interest them and try and figure out why that interests them and run with it. Like, we've all seen the memes where it's like the DM's got all this like stuff planned, but they're in a tavern and there's like Jiggles the Goblin. That's a random NPC that he made up on the spot, and all of a sudden all they want to do is it's all about Jiggles the Goblin, right? And it's just so true, because you never know what's going to strike a nerve with your players. And me as a DM, I've learned to let go a lot of times and go with the thing that they seem interested in, even if it wasn't the thing that I planned. And
The frozen methodology.
yes, the frozen methodology. Well, and like here's the thing too, like, so let it go. So like,
Yes.
and it can be hard, right? To do that at times. And disheartening too, because it's like you put all this work in, but like they don't seem to give a crap and it's some random thing. Um, but I've learned like, as the GM, you always feel like you're the one that's supposed to be up in front of the group and doing the talking and directing. Um, but one of the lessons that I had to learn was that, what, also as the GM, I need to listen when they talk because they're going to tell me a lot of times exactly what it is they want. Even if it's like, "Ooh, I hope they don't do this." Well, when they say that, they really want you to do that 9 times out of 10, because it's like the interesting thing that they thought of that is jumping into their heads. And you know what? It just go with it. Or figure out how you can start incorporating that back into the material you've already created. Maybe meet in the middle somewheres. But if there's a hook out there and they're already biting on it, you know, personally, I find it's a lot more hassle for me to pry the hook out of their mouth and try and dangle a different one in front of them because it's the one I wanted them to bite. Uh, it's a lot harder to do that than it is for me to just go, "Oh, the hook's in their mouth. Why don't I just real pull on this line instead?" Of trying to get them to do something else. At the end of the
Yeah,
day, I was just gonna say, at the end of the
there's you don't
day,
need
all right, real quick, at the end of the day, the question is, are you having fun as the GM and are they having fun as the players? As long as those two things are happening for me, I really don't care what direction we go in.
you don't need to be married to the material, and that's where I was going with it. And there's some times where I I don't I don't create until I have an idea of what the party is interested in. Uh, like, okay, well, I might have some ideas, but I wait and see, like, okay, what do we have going on here? What is the direction? What is the thought patterns of the characters? And I'll touch base sometimes with my players in between sessions to see where things stand. A little bit of a spoiler, for my Dungeons and Delving game. I guarantee you, in my session notes of planning, there was not a talent show that was on my agenda. Sure, I made a character who, was designed for entertainment, but until Bobby was like, "Hey, we should have a talent night." Yeah, in this hard packed world of cast off, we need to do talent. All right, sure, let's
A
make this
talent show,
happen.
yeah. We're all in high school again.
But when players they want to do something, sure, I can dedicate a session or a portion of a session, to this aspect of the game that player is bitten onto and interacted with a character that you know could fulfill that itch. Um, you know, Dave and I both will put out things, and whatever the players gravitate towards is how it's all going to go, and things can adjust and things can move, and you have your fun with it.
I generally have a very shotgun approach to plot hooks and storylines. And like even if I come up with like a loose like, "Oh, this is where we're going, this is what we're doing," I'll still throw things out there. And then what I find happens is as we're playing, the players kind of start defining what the main plot and the storyline is. And then all I have to do is keep feeding that back to them. And rarely do I have to worry about them like going off in tangents or doing other things. You know, honestly, it's like just kind of like having an open mind when you're running. So Fear says exactly they latch on to something completely irrelevant. Welcome to D&D. But he didn't say that, I did. But they won't look at the chest in the room or ask about the strange necklace the NPC wears or the weird thing the guy in the corner is doing. Well, here's the thing, right? ask them about the irrelevant thing. Like, try and get them to tell you why they're interested in that thing. Ask them what they think it means. Um,
So
let them speculate about it.
some people might not be comfortable with questions. So what you can do is your NPCs that interact with them should always be asking questions. And if questions become the format of conversation, as the NPCs are basically just kind of drilling into, these characters, eventually the players are going to be like, oh well, maybe I should ask some questions too. But there's also no problem with like taking 5-10 minutes away from your playtime, and just ask like, hey guys, I put this in here and you didn't really seem to interact with it or ask any kind of questions. Am I doing something wrong? Did you not notice? Like, so sometimes it could just generally be you didn't put enough emphasis on something. And if they are new players, they might not know that they should be asking questions and looking for secret doors, or looting the chest. Like, if they're new, they might not have enough experience to do it. Like, even new players might have the concept of a mimic, in their heads, and like, well, I don't want to fight one, so every chest is possibly a mimic, so I'm just not going to open any chests.
That's how
So
you
like if you
that's how you defeat the mimic. You just don't open chests.
So, like, if you destroy that misnomer that, oh yeah, not all chests are going to be mimics, and you do want them to gain treasure and gain loot, um, you know, that is a way to like overcome that obstacle.
The
But
other thing too is,
talking always helps.
yeah, talking always helps. Asking direct questions. Also, like, how can you relate the thing that you want them to be interested to their characters personally, right? Like that is always a much stronger hook, because like if you're like, hey, like I really wanted them to want to notice the strange necklace that one of the NPCs is wearing. Well, when you describe it, find a way to personalize it to one of the characters. Have it have something to do with their homeland, where they're from, or maybe they've seen a necklace like that before somewhere else. So this way you can kind of like nudge them in that direction. So Germano, my players are about to go to a plane that is a giant creature. With the NPCs living on the surface of it, what mood would work with that? So it depends, right? Like, what is the purpose of the creature? Like, what are the people's relationship with that particular creature? Do they know that their plane exists on or within a living creature, or is this something that's going to be discovered through play? Does everyone know about it? And like, there's a prophecy that says, "Hey, this thing's going to wake up and eat us all." Right? Like, so, and like, how close are we to that prophecy being fulfilled? You mentioned the players just arriving. Is that part of the prophecy? Strangers arriving from some far off place, and then Cthulhu wakes up and eats us all for living on his back for the past eon. Like, then it might be a mood of dread and fear, right? Or like, is like the thing like, oh, we sacrifice things to the sleeping thing, right? We just throw it over the edge, it ends up in its mouth and it stays asleep, because that's what how things work, right? That could be its own
Yeah.
mood.
So if it's a symbiotic relationship, either through like sacrifice and worship, that's different than the, oh, well, we essentially live in the creature's hair, and we kill its mice and its mites and lice,
Or we are
that
its
that
mites and lice.
well, there's that too. Um, but so depending upon what that relationship is with this creature is going to really determine like what the mood needs to be. But I would say, like, if you're talking about, things living on the back of a creature, if the thing is slumbering, you don't need to do anything different. If the thing is mobile, then every so often you need to have acknowledgement that um you know, things in the distance are getting closer without you actually doing any moving, if as long as the characters aren't aware that they're actually on this thing. Because again, the knowledge of what the players have, is determined as well. But I think it would be awesome if they didn't know, they show up and they're doing stuff, and it's like, okay, oh well, about your day, you're kind of milling around town, and while you might not feel the motion, it looks like that mountain is getting closer. That some large object in the distance, seems bigger than it was a half hour ago. And that could be a really cool aspect of what this plane is about, because obviously this thing is traversing in some way, shape, or form. So therefore, there needs to be some other kind of object out there that can move. Maybe the object's getting smaller. Like, oh my god, is somebody destroying the mountain? Is somebody, whatever. Um, so like let the mystery of they're on the back of a creature be part of the game, and have to find that out, and then see what the relationship is, with the people that are here, and then get to explore that aspect.
I mean, that's definitely a way to do it. I don't think that's really that important. It just depends on what you want, right? Like, if what do you want the relationship with the creature and the world to be? Is step one. Like Ted said, like you could have them discover it through play and they're unaware, or maybe everyone knows about it, right? Um, you know, you could go in, for the mood. It could be silly, right? Like if this creature is, is it conscious, or is it, you know, or is it sleeping, sleep, or thousands of years, or is it awake and everything is kind of happening, while it's awake, right? Like, because it could be silly. What happens if it burps, farts, sneezes? So you can get really silly with it. Or if this is a creature that slumbers, and as long as it's asleep and everything is hunky dory, but as soon as it wakes up, it's going to shake everything that's living off of it like a dog shakes water off, right? So that is going to be more of a horror type theme, I think, right? Um, you could go with a mystery, especially if no one's aware that this plane is actually a living creature. Are they on the inside of the creature, or are they on the outside of the creature? Like, these could all be factors. Like, you have the movie Inside Out. There's been tons of movies where people have to go inside of other people to do things, right? And actually, like, the systems of the body become threats in and of themselves. The body tries to fend off foreign invaders. So there's so many different directions you can go in it. I don't think we can properly tell you what the mood should be, but we can kind of just guide you in, like, what are the questions that you should be asking in order to figure that out. So Ted, we are at
So
the
we're at
halfway
the
mark.
That's what I was just about to say. We're at the halfway mark. So you guys know what that means. If you look above our heads, or whatever direction it is at the moment, you can see that we are powered by Easy Roller Dice. Whether it's your first set of dice or your 1 million set of dice, Easy Roller Dice Ball for all your dice rolling needs. Uh, Number one, down in the link below, yeah, down in the description below, you're gonna find a link and a promo code to Easy Roller Dice. Get 25% off your first order with them. But next to that should be another link to their Fire and Ice campaign that's currently going. It's already funded, doing some awesome dice sets that you really want if you're into very cool Fire and Ice themed dice. I know I'm looking forward to getting a set of each for myself. So you should too. So go check that out. Join the campaign before it's too late.
You'll find other links there as well. We ran a Kickstarter for our Zoomafia RPG. We've basically got 2/3 of the way funded. Did not get the last third, so we're gonna recalibrate and we're gonna rerun that Kickstarter. We learned some lessons, figured out how to get the goals down a little bit, and also what people seem to like and maybe didn't care about as much. So we're going to tweak those things. You can sign up for the launch page so you get notified when it's out there. Also coming up in the middle of August, is it the 18th through the 22nd? Ted
Yes.
will be running some 5e D&D in a castle in Ohio for 24 hours. If his table fills up, or if 24 hours is not enough for you, there is also a hardcore mode going on in that same castle where you'll be gaming for 36 hours. And lo and behold, Ted will still be there, and he will say hi and shake your hands and give you high fives or hugs or whatever seems appropriate at the time.
Yeah, so D&D in a castle is a great experience. I love going. I'm excited of checking out the new location that they have. So this will be my first time there, so I'll get to explore a new locale. Very much looking forward to that trip. So come on out and join me, and you don't have to pay. If you're here in the States, you don't have to pay international travel fare to get over to England, where I've done it previously,
And you don't need a passport.
and you don't need to get that passport too. So any other questions, or where else do we dive in on setting the mood?
So Fear's got another question. I have another question. Do you ever worry about mystery in your campaign being too obvious? For instance, if there's a bad guy hiding in plain sight or a guy who is obviously later the BBEG. Me personally, never. I used to all the time. I no longer care. You know what? In worst case scenario, they solve the mystery, and I will have to introduce new mysteries. But and also like D&D is this weird thing where, right, you can come up with what you believe is the easiest puzzle or problem in the world, and your players will never figure it out ever, ever, ever. Or you can give them the most complicated thing that you're like, there's no way they're going to get this. They're going to need all kinds of clues, hints. It's nigh impossible, and they guess it in 30 seconds. So
Yes, 100%. Uh,
save yourself some
I've I
trouble
have
and don't agonize over this.
I have struggled so hard as a DM with these concepts previously, and now I'm like, nope. If eh, I'm not, I learned this lesson from Dave of like, you don't always have to have the answer. You don't always have to know exactly what the solution is. You put something out in front of them, and if you've got players who are willing to try and do things, great. You come up with a mystery and you think this has got to be solvable. Sometimes it ain't. I have literally had to spoon feed players like clues of like, okay, try this, try this. And I'm like, oh my God, how can they not see this? It's like, it's clear as the writing on the wall and it's written in their language. How do
But
they
one of
not see it?
one of my favorite memes is like, I need puzzles for my players. I think it's like a Reddit, and someone's
Uh-huh.
just like, just just get a puzzle book for kindergartners, you'll be fine. And like, and the person's like, oh my god, I'm so insulted. You're insulting my players, blah blah blah. And then they come back, you were right. So it's just like, eh. Um, but also too, it's like such a cool moment for when you like put these mysteries in or these surprises in, and one of your players guess it, right? Like, don't take that away from them. Like, that's going to be an awesome moment for them in the game. You're just going to have to come up with new ones and don't get attached to them. Like, I don't. At some point, I stopped creating solutions. I just create problems and let the players interact with them and see what they. Um, Rarely will I even have a solution to any particular given problem at a time. I put up the obstacle. The players will figure out how to overcome it, and whatever. And I'll go with whatever seems reasonable or is fun and interesting. And here's what happens too. If you always set up these scenarios where there's only one right way to do it, one, you're setting yourself up for failure, because what happens if they never do the right thing and your game just has to stop, right? Or you have to basically give the to them, which is satisfying for no one. Like as a DM, that doesn't satisfy me, and the players aren't going to be particularly satisfied with it either. So you don't want to fall into that trap where you create a dead end for yourself in the game. Um, And then also, it sometimes it pigeonholes you and limits you from going with things that may have been more interesting that you didn't come up with. Because a lot of times my players will just do some bonkers, off the wall, batshit crazy thing that I'm like, wow, that is so much more fun than whatever it was that I was going to do. Again, as Ted said, the frozen solution is to just let it go and let them have the fun thing in their game, right? It's everyone's game. So when they can contribute and they do a better job than you, it's super helpful if you can just recognize that and go with it. Like, I think it'll
As
create a better experience for everyone at the team.
as long as you have players that are going to try and be like, okay, I've met an obstacle. I need to do something and I'm going to figure this out. As long as you have that kind of mindset in your players, it'll be great. Um, if you've got, players at the table that aren't thinkers, that aren't taking initiative, that, if it doesn't instantly come to them, they just say, okay, I give up. Then sure, you might have to do have an answer, but it comes down to knowing your players, knowing your table. What are they going to do versus, versus, what do you have planned? I mean, I've as a DM, I've come up with something and, you know, I stuck with, well, this is what I came up with. And when the players aren't viewing things the way I wanted, I struggled with, well, how do I handle this situation? Now I'll create obstacles and a lot of times I will have a solution or what I see as the way out. But if a player does something, as Dave, kind of was saying, that's creative and works, why should I slow down the game and force the fun to a grinding halt so that they can do something else? It's more fun for everybody to just continue the story and have some kind of plan work on the obstacle, then nope, they must find my solution. And I know some DMs out there really hate that mentality of letting the players go with whatever creative thing they come up with, or even more hate the idea of not having a set solution. And they're like,
Or having
like
it be
I've
their
I've seen,
solution.
yeah, I've had I've seen online conversations about that where like they will get on their high horse and scream from the mountaintop like, no, it must be the solution that the DM comes up with, and how dare you not create a solution to your own problem. And I'm like, whatever, man.
And that being said, it doesn't mean you have to let anything go through, right? Like, if it doesn't make sense, it doesn't make sense. It- you know,
Right.
because that's not really a solution. But if they're being creative and thinking outside the box and coming up with something different, or if maybe it's not really that different, it was not an angle you particularly saw, and it makes sense, right? In that scene, in that encounter, then then there's no harm in going with that, right? As long as it makes sense, right? If everything we should be doing as GMs and players is in service to forwarding the narrative of this cooperative story we're telling together. As the GM, sure, we get we have responsibility of running all the NPCs, and you're trying to wrangle the plot threads, and have interesting and fun encounters for your players to go through. But also, you just one of the biggest things you can do to help yourself is just be flexible and not getting stuck. Well, Mr. Prepper, or Dr. Prepper, uh, when do you decide to give in and accept that your players are dumb? Well, only you can truly know your friends, and generally, your friends reflect is a reflection of yourself.
All
So
right, I'm gonna speak to the unpopular opinion. Uh, as much as I love every single person that I have run for, uh, the time to accept that is session zero. Uh, every
yeah,
player is going to do something stupid. And at all times, there is going to be somebody at your table that an obvious answer, the obvious next step is just going to be unseeable, unthinkable, ungraspable at that moment. Um, I've done it. I've seen it as a player, and I've seen it as a DM. Because even if it's something that they've created in their backstory, even if it's something like that is like, oh, here's an end goal, if it's not continually shoved down their throat, there can be a time where it's like, oh yeah, um, you know, I've got something I'm supposed to be working on. In our current Ravenloft game, the DM did one of the things I said, here, like they gave handouts of here are the character and group goals you have. And I am the keeper of them. I keep them in my little gaming bag that I travel with. And I brought all my stuff and whatever have you, but I left the cards in the bag when I pulled out my dice and my character sheet. And I had to be beaten over the head with like a hey, isn't this attached to, one of those things? And I'm like, well, now I'm like, looking through, like, another player pulls out the notebook and starts reading through his notes and like so like even me, a veteran gamer of, more than 30 years playing this beloved game, I even have, stupid moments. So, yes, accept from the get go that your players and sometimes the characters are going to be or do stupid things. And if you can keep that in your head and be able to occasionally, nicely the first time, remind them of, hey, this does this seem familiar, or does this link to anything important to you, and just kind of subtly remind them that, hey, this is linked to that thing that you're looking for, or insert whatever story aspect, because it's going to happen.
well, sometimes too, like you got to remember, like something that was a week ago for a character could be 2 months for the player in real life, right? So it might not be at the forefront, but also like you know, Ted kind of answered that question earlier. When do you just accept? When do you just give up and accept that your players are dumb? Well, one, you should just one at some point you have to know the people you're playing with. I highly recommend playing with your friends, or if they're not your friends, becoming friends with them, because the game is much better with friends than it is with strangers that don't give a shit about each other. In that way lies madness and generally bad games. But also session zero too, like when you're not familiar with each other, that's a place where you guys can start to get familiar, understand what your goals are in the game as as the characters, but also as the players. So hopefully you can get on the same page. And then over time, as you game with people, then you should have a better grasp of what kind of players you have. And when you're putting things out there, you're putting things out there that are within the scope of these particular players. Uh, Whether you think they're dumb or not, that is up to you. But um, you know, you could have someone who's the smartest person in the world, but if they're just not exposed to a particular thing, they're not going to know about it, right? You only know what you know. And so understanding the scope of your players to the best of your ability goes a long way. And yes, Aaron kind of like summed some of that up for me pretty well. The PC's intellect, intelligence, common sense, and street smarts, right? Also, maybe emotional intelligence as well, and there's probably some other things in there. Everyone's going to be good at doing some things and not good at doing. It's just the nature of people. And hopefully, as a GM, part of what we have to do is try and figure out what people we have at the table and how best to work with that. That's why not all players belong at all tables, but there is a table for every player.
I think for the most part that's true. I've definitely gamed with some people that uh need a little bit more help or structure at the table than I was prepared to give them at the time. So but for the most part, yeah.
So, with getting in the mood, what are some other ways to get into the mood? Like, I'll throw some things out there. Obviously, you can create ambiance with music. And like back in the day, we used to play different things for different scenes. Um, Basically just from our music collections. But now, there's Sirenscape and so many other things out there that you can have tailor made and custom made to your particular campaign ventures you're running. That stuff is so much easier.
I'll take this in one direction. Not everybody has the capability, but like I run, or I play a lot of games, here at the table that, if you look on the channel, you can see, some of our home games from way back when. And the ambiance is, clearly a nerddom. So you can, be immersed in the fantasy and the gaming aspect of it. So that part can be fun, but isn't available to everybody. But another aspect that the gaming group that we most of our gaming groups do this, but with the one last night, like, we make food an aspect of our gathering. And while the it doesn't affect the mood of the game,
But it
as
could.
Dave says, well, it could. But as Dave says, like, you should be gaming with your friends because the camaraderie is important at the table of the players as well as the characters. So having the food aspect, like, it becomes a conversation in between sessions. What are we doing? How are we doing? Oh, we're going to do this potluck thing. Okay, well, you're going to bring this, you're going to bring this, you're going to bring that. Okay, now we do this thing here. Or, oh, we're going to do, like, last night we did tacos. So, like, everybody's chiming in on what aspect of the meal. So we're thinking about, oh, well, we're going to have this, this great meal when we get there.
So real
So
quick, if
yeah.
if you can't figure out how to execute dinner together as a group, you have no chance in the dungeon together.
That's for truth. So having the meal and the conversation and the food, it brings everybody together. There's a reason why families, for eons have said, well, we need to have the sit down meal to talk about your day and to talk about the things that are important in your life. Um, you know, and as you're just sharing, like, you can be like, oh, hey, this is what's going on in my life, and things that become important, or you might not have thought to share in a group chat or a group text or email. Now all of a sudden, like, oh, well, I can bring this out, and oh, well, congratulations on the promotion, or oh, I'm sorry, this bad thing happened. And you can celebrate and commiserate and join in who the people are as people before you kind of get back into the teamwork of the characters. And I really feel like that's a good thing that I've done with or that we've done with the gaming groups, because it means something, and I feel it adds to the overall mood of the game or the
Yeah,
gathering.
and that definitely ties the group tighter together. But and earlier I mentioned music, but you can also use sound effects. You can use lighting. Also, a lot of that's a lot of that stuff was a lot less accessible when we first started playing. Where now some of that stuff's pretty cheap, right? Like if you're playing like a futuristic game and maybe you're not playing D&D at all, maybe you're playing Starfinder or another, uh, you know, another science fiction game. You can string up LED lights. You can have different colors. You could there's different ways to have different colored lights that can go off that you could probably have programmed, through your laptop or something you have in your house or whatever. If, especially if you have like a smart home or whatever. Like there's so much you can do. You can have physical props at the table, to make it feel more like the game, like the setting that you're playing in. Whether that's physical props that you hand out or just display, or the miniatures and terrain at the table. These are all things you can do to kind of get the ambiance going. What about groups that game online? So that's tricky. But here's the thing: is like at the end of the day, you need to. I'm not going to tell you what to do, but my personal opinion: you need to have a human connection, other people, for this game to be maximized, for you to get the most out of it. So even if they're just people online, and you've met them that way, I recommend going out of your way to actually, try and um interact with them more personally, whether it's through chats, whether you guys have like an open, an open opening in the game beforehand, where like you gather 30 minutes before the game starts, so people can just chat and get to know each other. Definitely, if it's an online group and you don't know each other, I really suggest you have session zero and you implement different things, social contracts, use safety tools because you're playing with people you don't know. Um, but yeah, they're humans. Try and connect with them. Like the game is best when played with other humans, and you can, be humans together.
So as Dave says, when you're dealing online, you can use Sirenscape, or any other kind of soundboard. You can have okay, well, we're gonna have a gather time and we're gonna have a play time. So that you have that chance to get together and talk beforehand, so that you can build that camaraderie, just like the dinner chats, just without the dinner. Try to connect with who the people are. Um, you know, and it's like with us, like there's always the gather time before our stream, but that's just so that everybody has time to make sure you're in, mic checked, and windows are moved around and what have you. But at the same time, it's also the time that people can be talking and you know celebrating, commiserating, or just general chatting. Because again, you want to develop that rapport, you want to develop that friendship, so that you have a better connection as individuals, so that you can have better connections as characters. Because while we play for a handful of hours every week or every month, or however often you're getting together, the characters live together. Like they are spending vast amounts of time around each other that we as players, we don't ever get to see. So there are things that you're not going to think about that are absolutely commonplace. They're going to have conversations where, like, okay, well, we don't need to get into it, but maybe over last night's campfire, I shared something important about my character, and now everybody knows this. And you can remind people that, okay, well, you have this tidbit of information to either use against me, or to bolster me, or whatever have you.
Back, back in the
you
day,
know
we used to do GM 911s, and we'd take people's questions and do a whole video on it. And some of those questions, frankly, to me were horrifying. Like, I'm like, like for one, like they weren't game questions. Like they wanted game solutions for their problems, but their problems weren't game problems. They were just, most of them were just interaction problems and group dynamic problems and just people problems, right? That seemed like they weren't playing with their friends, right? Because some of the things that we would get, I'm like, who the hell are you playing this game with? Like, it made no sense to us, and that's why we really do stress like trying to connect with people outside the game, because certain behaviors generally don't happen between people that are friends, right? You wouldn't do that to someone you're friends with. Hopefully, it circumnavigates a lot of issues and problems. So we are at the very end here, and we will be back Tuesday night, and we will be playing some fifth edition Dungeons and Dragons with uh Nerdarchy's Ted here running his Dungeons and Delving game.
Yeah,
And
I think we're up to session 8 of this one. So you know, we're past the halfway point for this campaign.
yeah, we're cruising right along. So come on back, and of course we'll be back here not next Sunday, but the following. Ted's got something going on, so we won't be here. But check in with us on Sundays because most of the time we are here. And with that, until next time, nerdy.
Stay nerdy.
Snap.